He was born into a world where doors opened before he even touched them. Tall gates, quiet guards, large houses with too many rooms and not enough warmth. From the outside, his life looked perfect. People pointed at him and said he was lucky. They said he had everything. But none of them lived inside his head. From a young age, something felt off. While other children laughed easily, he stayed quiet. When teachers spoke to him, he stared at the floor. He learned fast, but cared about nothing. His marks were good, then suddenly terrible. His moods changed without warning. One day calm, the next day angry enough to break things. His father noticed early, but he believed money could solve it. His father was a billionaire, a man who built an empire from hard work and sharp decisions. He understood numbers, deals, and power, but feelings confused him. When his son struggled, he did what he knew best. He hired help. First came private tutors, then child experts, then famous doctors flown in from other countries. Each one stayed for a while, took notes, asked questions, and left with polite words and large payments. Nothing changed. As the boy grew older, the problems grew with him. He stopped caring about rules. He skipped school, then dropped out of elite programs his father paid millions for. He spoke less and less. Sometimes days passed without him saying a word. Other times, his anger exploded. He shouted at staff, broke furniture, and disappeared for nights without telling anyone where he went. The mansion felt less like a home, more like a silent witness. The staff whispered. The guards avoided eye contact. Everyone knew something was wrong, but no one knew how to fix it. His father tried to be patient, then strict, then distant. Meetings became more important than conversations. Business trips replaced family dinners. The media began to notice. Articles appeared online, carefully written, but sharp enough to hurt. They called the boy troubled. They called him a failure. Some even said he would destroy everything his father built. His father pretended not to read those stories, but they followed him everywhere. At meetings, at events, in quiet moments late at night, relatives offered opinions without offering help. Some said the boy needed discipline. Others said he was spoiled beyond repair. A few suggested cutting him off completely. Maybe then he'll learn, they said. Over time, their voices grew louder, and his father's hope grew smaller. The boy felt it all. Every look of disappointment, every whisper behind his back. He knew people expected nothing from him anymore. That knowledge sat heavy in his chest. He stopped trying to prove them wrong because deep down, he believed them. He moved through life like a shadow. Expensive cars meant nothing. Luxury clothes stayed untouched. He found no joy in parties filled with people who only smiled because of his last name. They laughed too loud, praised him too much, and knew nothing about him. At night, walked alone through quiet streets, far from the mansion. Places where no one recognized him. Places where money didn't matter. He watched ordinary people live ordinary lives. A man closing his small shop. A woman waiting for a bus after a long shift. Kids sharing snacks on the sidewalk. There was something real there. Something he couldn't name. Still, felt empty. One evening, things reached a point no one expected. After a long argument with his father, words were said that could not be taken back. His father, tired and frustrated, finally said what he had been holding inside for years. He said he didn't know how to help anymore. He said maybe some people were just broken. The boy didn't reply. He just left. Days passed. Then weeks. The staff searched. The guards made calls. His father used every connection he had. When the boy finally returned, thinner and quieter than before, no one knew what to say. He went to his room and shut the door. That was when something changed inside his father. Not hope, but surrender. He stopped calling doctors. He stopped arranging meetings. He told people his son needed space, but deep down, he had given up. He focused on his work again, convincing himself that at least one part of his life still made sense. The boy noticed the difference. No more pressure. No more plans. Just silence. Strangely, that hurt more than the arguments. Being fought for felt better than being ignored. One morning he left the mansion early and walked until his feet hurt. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he couldn't stay. The city slowly changed around him. Tall buildings gave way to older streets. Clean sidewalks turned rough. The air felt heavier, louder, more alive. That was when he saw how other people lived when no one saved them. He saw families living in one small room. He saw children selling small items just to help their parents. He saw tired faces that still carried warmth. People smiled at strangers without expecting anything back. It confused him. He stopped near a small roadside area where people gathered. Some sat on broken steps. Some leaned against walls. Life here wasn't easy, but it was honest. No pretending. No masks. He sat down, unnoticed. Just another quiet figure in the crowd nearby. A young girl was sorting through a small bag. Her clothes were old but clean. Her hands moved quickly, like she had done this many times before. She counted coins, then sighed, then smiled anyway. She didn't see him. She didn't know who he was. And for the first time in his life, it felt like relief. She spoke to an older woman beside her, offering help without being asked. She shared what little she had. There was no fear in her eyes, only tired kindness. He watched her longer than he meant to. Something about her felt different. Not special in a loud way. Just real. She stood up and walked past him, close enough that he could hear her breathing. She didn't stop. She didn't stare. She didn't judge. She treated him like part of the world, not a problem to fix or a story to tell. That moment stayed with him. As the sun lowered, stood, and walked away. But his steps felt lighter. For the first time in a long while, his mind wasn't filled with noise. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. But without trying, she had done something no doctor or expert ever did. She had made him feel human. He returned to the mansion that night, but something inside him had shifted. The walls still felt cold, the rooms still felt empty, but there was now a quiet question in his heart. What if the world wasn't done with him yet? What if someone out there saw him not as a burden, but as a person? He didn't know it then, but the girl he barely noticed would soon become the one person who refused to give up on him. Even when everyone else already had, he couldn't stop thinking about her. The girl with quiet eyes. The one who moved through the crowded streets like she belonged to them, and not to the world he had known. Something about her was different. She didn't see his last name. She didn't care about the mansion he came from, or the cars he drove. She only moved as if life demanded her attention, and she gave it fully to whoever needed it. The next day, he returned to the same streets. At first, he tried to avoid her, afraid that noticing her too much might be strange or creepy. But he didn't want to leave without seeing her again. He wanted to understand why she had affected him so much. The city was noisy. The sound of motors, chatter, and distant music filled the air, but it felt alive in a way his mansion never had. He saw people greeting each other in small ways, smiles, nods, even handshakes. Life was raw, unpolished, and chaotic, yet there was honesty in it. He realized that this honesty was something he had never known. There she was again, sitting on the same curb, carefully arranging small items she carried with her. Coins, a few snacks, scraps of paper, a small notebook. She seemed busy, yet calm. He walked closer, silently, not wanting to startle her. "Are you okay?" she asked suddenly, not looking up from her work. Her voice was soft but firm. He froze. He hadn't expected her to speak to him, not even to notice him. Yes, I'm fine," he said, his words awkward and uneven. He wasn't used to speaking to someone without an agenda. She glanced at him for a brief moment. Just a flicker of acknowledgement, then returned to her things. "All right," she said simply, as if she already knew he would be. There was no judgment in her tone, no pity, just a calm acceptance. He felt an unfamiliar urge to talk, to say something that mattered, but the words wouldn't come. He realized that he had spent so long being spoken to, being told what to do, that he had forgotten how to speak for himself. For the next few days, he found himself returning to that street. Sometimes he watched from a distance, sometimes he stayed close. Each time, he noticed small things about her. The way she smiled at a stray dog, how she shared her small snack with a child who came begging, how she didn't complain, even when life seemed unfair. He realized she had a strength that wasn't loud or demanding. It was quiet but unshakable. One day she noticed him sitting a few feet away. "Why do you keep coming here?" she asked, her voice curious but not accusing. He hesitated. He had no simple answer. I don't know, he admitted. I guess. I just wanted to see someone who, I don't know, cares about other people. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he felt exposed in a way he wasn't used to. Most people only saw him as a rich kid with problems. She saw him as a human being. Maybe she even saw the boy he used to be before everyone gave up. "You don't seem like someone who belongs here," she said. There was no mockery, no judgment, just an observation. "I don't," he said honestly. "I've never belonged anywhere." She nodded, as if she understood, and he felt something shift inside him. No one had ever nodded and understood him before. Not teachers, not therapists, not even his father. They began to talk, slowly. At first, it was small things about the weather, about the city, about simple observations. She never asked about his money or his family, and he appreciated that more than he could say. It was a conversation without judgment, without expectation. Gradually, he began to open up. Not all at once, not fully, but in small pieces. He told her about his favorite books from childhood, the ones he had hidden in the mansion's library. He mentioned the music he liked when no one was around. He laughed briefly at memories no one would have thought funny. She listened. Truly listened. She didn't interrupt or offer advice. She just heard him. And for the first time in his life, he felt that someone was on his side without any conditions. It wasn't easy. His anger and bitterness didn't vanish overnight. There were moments when he snapped at her, when he felt frustrated at himself and the world. But she didn't run. She stayed, patient, calm, never pushing him, never blaming him. She just kept being present. Other people noticed the change too, though not immediately. His father saw him coming home more often, quieter, less destructive. Staff noticed fewer outbursts. Friends who knew him from school whispered about a softer side they had never seen. But no one understood what was happening. Only he and the girl knew. One evening, they sat together on a small bench, watching the sunset spill orange and pink across the city. He felt a strange sense of peace he had never known. "I don't know why you care," he said quietly. "I don't have a reason," she replied. "I just do." Her words stayed with him. It wasn't about money or status or fixing him. It was about simply being there, about believing that he mattered. That simple act was more powerful than any therapy, any money, any plan his father had tried. Over time, their bond grew stronger. He began to share more, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He told her about nights he spent wandering the city alone, about fears he had never admitted. She shared her own struggles too, her daily fight to survive, the challenges her family faced. They didn't compete over who had it worse. They just understood that both their lives were hard in different ways. The girl's presence gave him a sense of responsibility he had never felt before. Not responsibility to obey rules, not responsibility to be perfect, but responsibility to someone else's trust and care. He started noticing small things, locking doors, helping a stranger, returning items he found. These were simple actions, but they felt monumental to him. He began spending more time in her world. He saw neighborhoods he had never visited. He watched people struggle, but also help each other in ways that no one in his world seemed to notice. He started to understand that life was bigger than wealth, bigger than power, bigger than status. Life was about connection, about people. Their days together were not perfect. They argued, sometimes his temper flaring, her patience tested, but they learned to speak honestly. She never flinched when he raised his voice. She never left when he pushed too far. Her calmness was not weakness. It was strength, and it grounded him. he realized that no one else in his life had ever treated him like this. His father tried, but with guilt and money. Doctors tried, but with formulas and schedules. Friends tried, but with curiosity and judgment. She treated him like a person. Nothing more, nothing less. For the first time, he started to believe he could be more than the angry, broken boy everyone gave up on. Not because of himself, not because of money, not because of therapy, but because someone had chosen to care when it seemed impossible. One rainy evening, they ran for shelter under a small shop awning. He laughed at the suddenness of the storm, and she laughed too. The sound of her laughter was like a warm light he hadn't known existed. He realized that he hadn't laughed like that in years. It's not truly. As they watched the rain, he felt a quiet hope stirring in his chest. Maybe life wasn't finished with him yet. Maybe with her he could find a way to exist without fear, without anger, without feeling like a mistake. That night, as he returned to the mansion, he didn't feel the usual weight of emptiness. The walls were still cold, the room still silent, but inside him something had shifted. For the first time, he didn't feel completely alone. He knew one thing with clarity: no matter what anyone else thought, no matter how hopeless he felt, there was one person who believed in him. One person who had not given up, and he realized he wanted to live in a way that honored that belief. Even if he didn't yet know how, the poor girl had no idea what she had started. She only knew that she had met a boy who needed someone to see him, and that was enough for her. For him, it was everything. From that day on, he began seeking her out every chance he could. Not for comfort, not for approval, but simply because being near her made life feel like it had meaning. And in her quiet way, she was teaching him lessons. No school, no money, no therapist ever could. The world outside the mansion had become his classroom. The girl had become his guide. And slowly, piece by piece, he was beginning to rebuild something he thought was lost forever, the understanding that being alive wasn't about wealth, or power, or success. It was about connection, about caring, about being cared for, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he could belong somewhere. Life began to feel different for him. Not perfect, not easy, but different. He looked forward to the days he could see her, even if just for a few minutes. Her presence was a strange kind of comfort, one that he had never known before. For the first time, he felt that he didn't have to hide all his feelings, that it was okay to be angry, sad, or unsure, as long as someone cared enough to stay. But the world outside their small bubble was not kind. People noticed the changes in him and reacted in ways he had not expected. His father, who had once seemed resigned, began asking questions. Small ones at first. Why are you out so often? Who is she? Why do you look calmer? The tone wasn't angry, but there was curiosity and concern, wrapped up in worry. He avoided answering as much as he could. He didn't want his father to misunderstand. He didn't want anyone to try to control what was happening. This was not something to be fixed. It was something real. Something human. Meanwhile, the girl noticed the changes too. He was quieter, less restless, and he laughed more often. But she also noticed the tension around him, the way people tried to pull him back into their world. Sometimes he would flinch at a sudden look, a question, or a hand placed on his shoulder. She understood even without knowing all the details. People who had given up on him before could still hurt him without meaning to. One day, they sat on a worn wooden bench in a small park. He watched her feed some birds, throwing bits of bread with careful hands. She smiled when the birds came close, her face lighting up in a way that made him feel something he couldn't name. You don't have to be afraid of people, she said suddenly, not looking up from the birds. Some people will always judge, but that doesn't mean you have to let them control you. He wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. For years, he had let the expectations and judgments of others shape him. Now, for the first time, he realized he could choose differently. But it wasn't easy. Old habits die slowly. He would sometimes retreat into anger or silence, lashing out without thinking. Once he raised his voice at her when she tried to stop him from wandering the streets alone in the rain. He shouted words he didn't even fully understand, words meant to hurt, words meant to push her away. Instead, she stayed. She didn't cry, didn't scold, didn't leave. She just waited until he calmed down and then spoke in the same gentle, steady way she always had. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "Even when you're angry, even when you push me away, I'm not going to leave." Her words were like a lifeline. He realized that no one had ever said that to him before. No one had ever meant it before. He felt a strange mixture of shame and relief. Shame that he had been so lost, relief that someone truly cared. Their days continued like this, a mixture of quiet moments and sudden storms. Sometimes they would walk through the city streets, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes they would sit in silence, just watching people live their lives. Each moment felt important, each small action meaningful. But life outside their little world did not wait. His father, friends, and even strangers began to notice the bond forming between them. His father's curiosity turned into concern. "Why does she have so much influence over you?" he asked one evening, his voice tight with worry. "She doesn't belong in our world. She doesn't understand it." He wanted to defend her, but words failed him. How could he explain that she didn't need to understand his world? She only needed to understand him, and that was enough. Rumors began to spread. People whispered about the girl, questioning her intentions. Some said she was using him, that she wanted his money, that she would ruin his life. He heard these words, felt their weight pressing down on him. And for the first time, he felt the fear of losing her. The girl, however, did not falter. She continued to treat him with the same calm, steady care. She didn't argue with the rumors. She didn't defend herself to anyone. She simply stayed, showing through her actions that her concern was genuine. One afternoon, as they walked near a crowded market, someone called out to him, "Hey, don't trust her. She's just after your money." The words cut through the noise, but she didn't flinch. She didn't yell back. She looked at him, and in her eyes he saw something unshakable. She believed in him, believed in their bond, without needing anyone else to approve. That moment marked a turning point for him. He realized that the world could be loud, judgmental, and harsh, but he had the power to decide who mattered. He could choose to believe in her just as she believed in him, but the pressure grew. His father, friends, and even strangers continued to question him. Each day brought new challenges, new doubts planted in his mind. He felt torn between the world he had known and the new life he was beginning to imagine. One evening, he confided in her. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "People expect me to be someone I'm not. They want to control me, tell me who I should trust. I feel trapped." She took his hand, a small but powerful gesture. "You're not trapped," she said. "You have a choice. You can listen to them, or you can listen to yourself. You can decide who you want in your life. You can decide what matters." Her words stayed with him. For the first time, he realized that he didn't have to let others dictate his life. He could make his own decisions, even if they were difficult, even if they went against everyone else's expectations. But making those decisions wasn't simple. Each choice came with consequences. Each step toward her world meant pushing back against the expectations of his old one. He knew there would be conflicts, arguments, and misunderstandings. He knew people would try to pull him back, to convince him that he was making a mistake, and they did. One day, his father confronted him directly. "You're changing," he said, his voice tight with concern. "I don't know if this is good. She's not part of our life. She doesn't understand what it means to be us. She can't protect you from what's coming." He felt anger rise within him, but also a strange sense of clarity. "I don't want to be part of your life," he said quietly but firmly. "Not like before. I'm not asking for permission to care about someone who sees me. I don't need anyone's approval for that." The argument ended with tension, silence, and a quiet understanding that things would not return to the way they were. His father did not approve, but he also did not stop him. For now, the boy had chosen a different path. The girl noticed the change. She noticed his confidence growing, his willingness to stand up for what mattered to him. But she also saw the burden of the world pressing down on him. She knew he was still fragile, still learning how to navigate life outside the protective walls of wealth and expectation. One rainy evening, They found themselves sitting under the small awning of a closed shop, watching the water run down the streets. He shivered, not from the cold, but from the weight of everything he was facing. "I'm scared," he admitted. "I'm scared that even with you I'll fail. That people will judge us, that I'll lose you, that I'll disappoint everyone again." She placed her hand on his shoulder, warm and steady. "Scared doesn't mean you're failing," she said. "It means you're human. You're learning. You're trying. And I'm not going anywhere, no matter what happens." Her words grounded him. For the first time, he felt that fear didn't have to control him. That even in the face of doubt, judgment, and uncertainty, he could choose to believe in himself and in the person who believed in him. Days turned into weeks. He continued to meet her in the streets, sometimes for hours, sometimes for just a few minutes. Each meeting strengthened their bond. Each conversation, each shared laugh, each quiet moment of understanding brought him closer to a sense of self he had never known. But the outside world continued to challenge them. People whispered, friends questioned, and strangers judged. Sometimes even his own thoughts betrayed him. He worried that he wasn't good enough, that she might leave, that he might fail again. Through it all, she remained constant. She didn't promise perfection. She didn't promise easy answers. She promised presence, care, and belief. And in that promise, he found the strength to keep moving forward. To face the world outside the small bubble they had created, he began to see that life wasn't about avoiding pain or criticism. It was about finding someone who saw you, truly saw you, and stayed. Someone who believed in you when the world had given up, and she was that someone with her. He started to imagine a future that didn't exist before. A life where he could be human, flawed, and real. A life where he could make choices, face challenges, and still feel loved and supported. A life where he wasn't defined by the expectations of others, but by the bonds he chose to nurture. And in that fragile, growing hope, he discovered a strength he never knew he had, a strength that would guide him through the storms ahead, the judgment of the world, and the battles within himself. Because even when life was hard, even when people doubted him, even when the world seemed against him, he had found someone who refused to give up, and that made all the difference. Life was becoming harder in ways he had not expected. The bond with her had grown stronger, deeper, yet the world around him was growing louder, more insistent. His father continued to watch him with worry. Relatives whispered behind closed doors, and people in his father's world began to question his choices. They didn't understand why he spent time with someone so different from him. They didn't understand why he allowed himself to care about anyone other than himself or the family name. One evening, after a long day of being pulled in a dozen directions, he stormed into the mansion. The walls that had once felt cold now seemed suffocating. He pounded his fists against the door of his room, frustrated with the expectations, the judgment, the constant pressure. No one could reach him here. No one could tell him what to do or how to feel. But even in this moment, her presence lingered in his mind. Her calm voice, her unwavering patience, the way she looked at him without judgment. He realized that she was the only person who had ever made him feel understood, truly understood. And yet the world around him threatened to take that away. The next day he sought her out. He found her near the corner of a busy street, sorting through a small bag of things she carried. She looked up and smiled, as if nothing could shake her peace. But he noticed her eyes were tired, her shoulders heavy with the weight of her own life. She carried burdens she had never asked him to understand, yet she bore them quietly. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice trembling slightly. She nodded, closing her bag carefully. "I'm listening," she said simply. He sat down beside her, trying to gather the words he didn't know how to say. "Everything is falling apart," he admitted. "People are saying things. They don't understand us. They say I'm making a mistake. They say you're not right for me." His hands shook slightly, betraying the anger and fear inside him. She reached for his hand, holding it firmly. "Let them say what they want," she said. "We don't have to answer to them. You can choose who matters in your life. You can choose who you trust. You can choose to keep what is real and true." Her words gave him courage, but the world was relentless. That night, a series of events shook everything he had started to build. A group of relatives confronted his father in the mansion, demanding that he separate the boy from the girl. They spoke of reputation, of society, of money lost and dignity ruined. His father, already exhausted, tried to mediate, but their voices were sharp, their words heavy with expectation. When he heard what was happening, he felt panic rising in his chest. He wanted to run away, to hide, to disappear into the streets where no one could reach him. But he also felt a spark of defiance, a fire he had never felt before. He would not let the only person who had cared for him be taken away. He ran to her the next morning, finding her near the small park where they had first spoken. She looked up, startled to see him so urgently approaching. "What's wrong?" she asked, concern flashing in her eyes. "They want to separate us," he said, his voice breaking. "They say we can't, that we shouldn't. I don't know what to do." She stood, taking a deep breath. "Then we face it together," she said. "We decide together what matters. We don't let fear or others' opinions take that away from us." And so they did. The following days were tense. Every time he returned to the mansion, whispers followed him. Every time he stepped outside, eyes seemed to watch, judging, questioning, criticizing. But through it all, she stayed by his side. She didn't promise that the world would be kind. She didn't promise that the storm would end. She only promised presence, care, and belief. And that was enough. One afternoon, an incident happened that changed everything. A small argument in the streets escalated when someone recognized him. A man shouted, calling her names, accusing her of using him. He felt his temper flare, the old anger rising inside him, ready to explode. But she stayed calm, stepping between him and the stranger, her eyes steady. "Stop," she said firmly. "You don't control us. You don't decide what we do. Walk away." The man hesitated, taken aback by her courage, and eventually left. He looked at her with awe, feeling a mix of gratitude and admiration he could not put into words. She had protected him without fear, without hesitation, without expecting anything in return. That evening, they sat together on a bench, rain falling lightly around them. He turned to her, voice soft but intense. "I don't know what I would do without you," he said. "You don't have to," she replied. "I'm here. That's all that matters." But the crisis was not over. The pressure from the mansion, from relatives, from society, continued to grow. One night, he overheard a conversation between his father and a trusted advisor. Words like mistake, danger, and reputation floated through the walls, cutting deep. His father, though conflicted, was being persuaded to force them apart. He felt anger and despair rise together. For the first time, he realized the true weight of the world's expectations. He realized how easy it would be to lose the one person who had saved him from himself. And he realized that he could not let that happen. He ran to her, finding her near the street where they had first met. She looked up, startled, but did not speak. She seemed to sense the storm inside him, the urgency, the fear, the determination. "They want to take you away," he said, voice trembling. "They don't understand us. They don't see what you mean to me." She reached for his hand, holding it tightly. "Then we face it," she said. "We don't run. We don't hide. We decide who we are and what matters." Together, her words grounded him. They made him realize that fear could not control him, that anger could not control him. Only he could decide what mattered. Only he could decide who he wanted to stand by. The next days were filled with confrontations, difficult conversations, and quiet moments of planning. He spoke to his father directly, not with anger, not with fear, but with honesty. "She's important to me," he said. "I care about her. She has helped me more than anyone else. I will not let her go." His father listened, conflicted, torn between loyalty, expectation, and love for his son. He did not fully understand, but he saw something in the boy's eyes that he had never seen before: courage and a determination to protect someone he cared about. Meanwhile, the girl remained calm, steadfast, and patient. She did not argue. She did not demand. She only showed through her presence that the bond they shared was real, that it was worth defending, that it was worth fighting for. One night, as they walked together through the quiet streets, he spoke softly. "I was lost before I met you. I didn't know how to live, how to care, how to trust. You have given me all of that." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the dim streetlights. "And you have given me hope," she said. "Hope that someone can change, that someone can fight for what is right, that someone can care when the world doesn't." It was a moment of quiet understanding, a recognition that they had become each other's strength. They had faced fear, judgment, and pressure, and yet they had remained together. They had chosen each other, and that choice was more powerful than any obstacle. But the test was not over. The world outside was still harsh. Relatives continued to question, friends continued to whisper, and strangers continued to judge. Every step forward came with resistance. Every smile was met with suspicion. Every moment of peace threatened by the outside world. And yet, they persisted. They learned to face the world together, to stand up for what mattered, to protect each other without fear. They discovered a resilience that neither had known they possessed. They realized that love, care, and trust were not just feelings. They were actions, decisions and choices made every day one evening. After another long confrontation with relatives, he returned to her, exhausted and emotionally drained. She did not ask questions, did not demand explanations. She simply held his hand and walked with him through the quiet streets, letting the city's lights reflect in the puddles at their feet. In that moment, he understood something profound. Life would not always be easy. People would continue to judge, challenge, and try to control. But the bond they had formed was stronger than any outside pressure. It was real. It was human, and it was theirs. For the first time, he felt a sense of power that had nothing to do with money or status. It was the power of choice, of courage, and of standing up for someone he cared about. He realized that this power was more valuable than anything he had ever known, more important than any lesson his father could teach, more lasting than any wealth he could inherit. And as they walked together, side by side, he knew one thing with certainty. No matter what the world threw at them, they would face it together. They had already survived the storms of fear, judgment, and expectation. They had already proven that their bond was unbreakable, and that bond would carry them through whatever came next. The days after the storm felt quieter, but the tension never fully disappeared. The boy had grown stronger, braver, but the world outside was still watching, waiting for him to stumble. He had learned how to stand firm, how to defend what mattered, how to care for someone in a way he had never understood before. Yet, he still wondered if it would ever be enough. The girl remained by his side, steady as the sunrise, as unyielding as the wind. She had no promises of riches or comfort to offer. She had no influence over his family or connections in the world he came from. She only had herself, her patience, her kindness, her quiet determination to believe in him when no one else would. And that, he realized, was everything. One afternoon, he decided to show the world that she mattered. He returned to the mansion, not with fear or anger, but with a quiet resolve. He walked through the halls, past the staff, who whispered behind their hands, past the guards who lowered their eyes, and into the study where his father waited. "I want to speak," he said, voice calm but firm. "All of it, the judgments, the doubts, the fears. I want to be honest, not with excuses, not with apologies, but with truth." His father studied him, eyes wary, but did not interrupt. He had seen this side of his son before, but this time there was no hesitation, no anger, no brokenness. There was strength. "She is not just a girl from the streets," he said finally. "She is someone who has seen me, truly seen me, when no one else could. She has believed in me when everyone else had given up. And I am not going to let her go. Not for money, not for reputation, not for anything." The room was silent. His father opened his mouth to speak, but words failed him. The staff outside the door had paused in their duties, sensing the shift in the house. Relatives who had doubted, who had whispered and judged, could only listen. I know you don't understand, he continued. I know it seems strange, but I am telling you the truth. She has saved me in ways you can't measure, and I will honor that. She is important to me, and I choose her. The words hung in the air. For the first time, the world he had known, the world of rules, expectations, and money was forced to confront something it could not measure. Love, loyalty, and care. His father, after a long silence, finally nodded. Not fully, not with complete understanding, but with respect. Respect for a son who had found his own voice, who had chosen someone who mattered without fear or expectation. Outside, the city carried on as usual. People went about their lives, unaware of the quiet revolution happening in one mansion. But the boy didn't care. He had learned that the only opinions that mattered were those of the people who truly saw you, truly understood you, and chose to stay. He returned to her that evening, finding her where they had first met so many months ago. She looked up as he approached, and for a moment there was no fear, no tension, no judgment, only recognition. I told them, he said quietly. I told them everything. I told them that you matter. She smiled, but it was more than a smile. It was relief, pride, and understanding all at once. And, she asked softly, they listened, he said. Not everyone, not completely, but enough. Enough to know that we have a chance. Enough to know that we can exist together without fear. They walked together through the streets, rain lightly falling around them, carrying the quiet smell of the city after a storm. Each step felt lighter than before. Each breath felt deeper. Each moment felt real. For the first time, he realized that the struggles, the anger, the judgments, the fear, they had all been necessary. Without them, he would not have understood the value of what he had. He would not have known the strength it took to stand for someone he loved. He would not have known the courage to face the world as himself, not as a product of wealth or expectation, but as a human being capable of care and loyalty. The girl remained beside him, her presence a constant reminder of what mattered. She had not changed for him. She had not tried to fix him. She had only been there, quietly, persistently, and without expectation. That was her power. That was her gift. As weeks passed, their bond deepened even further. The world continued to whisper, but they had learned to tune it out. They found small joys in simple moments, a shared meal, a quiet walk, a laugh over something silly, a silent understanding that needed no words. These moments were treasures more valuable than any wealth he had ever known. One evening, they found themselves on a quiet rooftop, looking out over the city as the sun set. The colors spilled across the sky, painting the buildings in shades of gold and pink. He turned to her, feeling a calm he had never felt before. I used to think life was about what you had, he said softly. Money, power, respect. I thought that could fix everything. But now, I know it's not. Life is about the people who see you, who care, who stand by you when no one else will. She nodded, smiling. And sometimes life is about being that person for someone else, she said. You saved yourself by trusting someone else. I just helped you see it. He took her hand in his, holding it gently. No, he said. You didn't just help me see it. You lived it. You chose to care every single day, even when it was hard. You chose to stay, even when everyone else left. You saved me. Her eyes softened, and she shook her head. I didn't save you. You saved yourself. I only walked with you. He laughed softly, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. It was a laughter free of fear, free of doubt, free of anger. A laughter that came from knowing that he had finally found something real. Something lasting, something human. The world around them continued, but it no longer felt threatening. He had learned that the outside world could try to push you down, could try to take away what mattered, could try to define you by what you had or didn't have. But it could not touch the bond they shared, the trust they had built, the love they had chosen. Days turned into months. The mansion, the wealth, the judgments, all of it, faded into the background. What remained was the connection they had forged, the quiet understanding that they had found in each other. It was not a perfect life. They still faced challenges, still faced moments of doubt and fear, but they faced them together, and that made all the difference. One afternoon, as they walked through a quiet street lined with small shops, a child approached them, holding a broken toy. He looked at them with wide eyes, unsure, and the girl knelt down to help him fix it. He watched, feeling a deep sense of admiration. She had never been heroic in the loud, obvious way the world expected. Her heroism was quiet, consistent, human. She cared without expectation, helped without reward, and believed without hesitation. He realized then that she had taught him the most important lesson of all, that life was not about wealth, power, or status. It was about connection, trust, and the courage to care when it was hard, to stand when it was difficult, and to believe when it seemed impossible. And in that moment, he understood that he had not only been saved by her, he had been transformed. He had become someone who could care, who could trust, who could face the world without fear. He had become someone human, as the sun set behind the buildings. Casting long shadows across the street, he turned to her and smiled. "We made it," he said quietly. "We did," she replied, smiling back. And for the first time, felt a peace that was not dependent on wealth, judgment, or approval. It was a peace that came from knowing that he had been seen, understood, and loved for who he truly was. The world had given up on him once. Society had judged him. His family had doubted him. Even he had lost hope in himself. But she had not. One poor girl, carrying her own struggles and burdens, had chosen to care when everyone else walked away. And that choice had changed his life forever. He looked out over the city, feeling the quiet hum of life all around him. People moved through the streets, busy with their own concerns, unaware of the journey he had taken, unaware of the bond that had saved him. But he didn't need their recognition. He didn't need their approval. He had found something far more valuable, someone who truly believed in him, someone who had never given up, someone who had shown him that being human, being real, and being loved was worth more than anything the world could offer. And in that truth, he found freedom, strength, and hope. They walked home together, hand in hand, their steps light, their hearts steady. The mansion still stood, the city still moved, and the world continued to whisper. But they no longer needed to listen. They had each other. They had trust, care, and love. They had chosen each other, and that choice would carry them through everything that came next. For the first time in his life, he felt whole. For the first time, he felt truly alive.